Welcome back, everybody. My name's Campbell Williams. I'm Group Strategy and Marketing Director at 6 Degrees Group. I need the word strategy in my job title, otherwise people like Joe won't talk to me. Joe and Nigel, as CTO types, are occasionally quite withering in their contempt for the colouring in department. I am the colouring in department, but I do share some of their contempt, which I'll come to later. So when I was trying to put these slides together, I thought, well, how do you follow those guys? So how do you follow somebody like Joe, who has probably forgotten more things than I've ever known? The short answer is don't even try. I've been in telecoms for 15 years, worked at Mitel for 9, so I could probably take Nigel on, but I tended to agree with him, so what's the point? So what I thought I would talk about is a few things that we observe out there at more of a macro level. Joe's touched on a few of them already. Something I call it's all a bit of a blur. Then talking a little bit about the habits that people in our industry, particularly marketing guys, have of confusing the heck out of people and how unhelpful that can be. How those same marketeers have been known to make it sound as if you can have your cake and eat it, that you can buy technologies that are all things to all men from suppliers that can be all things to all men themselves, and frankly, you can't. There was a few things that Joe touched on earlier in terms of some of the sort of inhibitors of technology, and there are always trade-offs. As somebody once put to me, the trade-offs exist because of physics. You know, there's no getting away from it. Joe touched on some of them earlier in terms of the speed of light. If you try and work your way around the speed of light, you're kind of doomed to failure. You know, so to paraphrase Homer Simpson, in this company we obey the laws of thermodynamics. We're going to try and continue to do so. So back on planet Earth, you know, when you take the technology hype, when you take some of the unhelpful nomenclature, unhelpful terminology, put them to one side, what are people actually trying to do? If there are certain things that aren't really that new and aren't really that disruptive, what things might actually be disruptive, and what sort of new technologies might be coming down the road? How can we harness them? What matters? What doesn't matter? All those sorts of things. And then Alistair will wrap up with with a couple of bits and pieces about our good selves. We don't want, same as Joe, same as Nigel, I'm going to be using some 6 Degrees slides, but I don't want to do it in a sort of sales pitchy way. It's just I spent a lot of time doing the colouring in the first place, so I am going to reuse the slides, and then we'll do a Q&A at the end. Nigel's had to go and do a webinar, but Joe will join us for the Q&A if you're brave enough. Feel free to ask us anything. So in terms of blurring, this is something that I've sort of been observing for a number of years, that our worlds are, if they're not starting to blur or converge already, it's happening pretty soon. So there was a good survey from our friends at Barcap recently talking to CIOs. And the top 2 things driving their spending decisions, which will be music to Joe's ears, server virtualization and cloud computing. So that was in their heads, that was influencing what they were doing, but back on planet Earth, what they were buying, their networking priorities were IP telephony, LAN switching, and WAN optimization. So in other words, what they're doing on the right-hand side is actual convergence, or getting their business ready for more converged technologies, and what they're evaluating is cloud and virtualizations. But in terms of blurring the two, how many companies really have a plan to do both? A sweeping generalization, I'm in marketing, that's what we do, but most IT directors I speak to looking at cloud, looking at virtualization, looking at going from a on-prem to off-prem, looking at disaster recovery models, they look at it from an IT perspective, not a telecoms perspective. Partly because they don't know necessarily that similar things can be done with your comms estate than can do with your IT estate. And other times it's just because nobody's out there educating people on what the options are. So that's a major area of blurring. The mobility with everything is just, there is no getting away from it. Many of you will have seen this research liberated from Cisco, that the number of internet-connected devices that we're going to have is just breathtaking. I think we're somewhere in between the 1.84 and the 3.47. That's a bit low. Who's got more than 6 right now? I mean, I'm comfortably above 6 right now. It's only going in one direction. I get very grumpy when I can't connect things to the internet. If I have to connect things to the internet through some sort of proxy device, it's just, I've got to hook it up to a PC to talk to the internet. It's just, you're wasting my time. I want everything connected and online all of the time. We've got 4G here now through Everything Everywhere. I heard a presentation on it last week or a couple of weeks ago where the conclusion was it's going to give you a better mobile experience. which was thanks. That's kind of what I hope for from a massive improvement in bandwidth. But when you've got 10 times more bandwidth, we are going to consume it. And that means we're going to need 10 times more of everything else. 10 times the storage, 10 times the speed, 10 times the backbone networks. Everything, you do make a small change at the edge, and its knock-on consequences are absolutely considerable across the rest of the network. And as business people, we just expect to be able to have high-speed access to our stuff wherever we are. And when we're offline, we tend to get a little bit twitchy. And this has been touched on already. I will build on it. In terms of enterprise IT and your web presence, there is blurring in your technology estate. That it used to be that IT and your technology was a very inward-facing thing. It's what people used at their desks, in their offices, to go about their work. But now so much of it has turned around and faced the internet, faced the customer, faced the end user, thanks to digital media, social media, and this is only going in one direction. Customers expect to serve themselves, find out more about you. Why would Nigel's got a good analogy he didn't have time to talk about today, that you buy an iPad and you don't get a user manual. Because why would you? Because you should know how it works, because it's easy. And if it doesn't, there's a YouTube channel that will give you instructions if you are a complete idiot. And why do they print something that's this thick, incurring huge expense when it's completely unnecessary? Because in this day and age, if it's not easy enough to use, you're not going to buy it in the first place. And if you do need help, there's plenty of good resources on the internet. Just go out and find it yourself. And that changes job roles. So you've got this blurring between IT directors and marketing directors that means that the way businesses consume technology from people like ourselves as suppliers changes quite dramatically. The sourcing model changes. This is the Gartner stat that Joe touched on, that by 2017, CMOs or marketing directors will spend more on IT than CIOs. But the overall trend is quite interesting. So we, as a sort of hosting provider, we've got a number of contracts out there where we're contracted with the marketing department, not the IT department, where the marketing guys, we've got a couple of fast food chains who should remain nameless, that they are doing some short-term campaigns. So they're standing up a microsite, they're doing some campaigns, short-term offers. So they spin up some capacity either on their own dedicated cloud or on our multi-tenant cloud, we don't care. They spin it up for the time that they need it and they take it down. So option A is for them to go to their in-house IT department, their global IT services, and say, can you do this for me, and then it'll be free? Or they come to us and they pay for it. Technology has now become too important to rely on the IT department. So the marketing guys are going, I'm spending millions on all the surround and noise for this campaign. I can't risk having the technology not working, so I'm going to get an expert to do it, because my IT guys can't necessarily spin up 100 web servers and hammer it for a month and then tear it back down again. And nor would you want them to, because it's an exceptional item. So IT has now become, or technology has become, so integral to how companies go to market that the marketing guys are getting involved. And some of the people that Joe put up there, the Blockbusters of the world, the Borders of the world, had they had more of a marketing function, had they had more of an outside world view, they may well still have been in business. They might not have had their lunch eaten by the Amazons, by the Love Films of the world. So in terms of things that are confusing out there, this is a bit of research that we haven't announced it yet, but we will do quite shortly, is that we asked several hundred people, half of them IT decision makers, half of them business decision makers, which of four groups of people used the most confusing language. Lawyers came in at 9.5%. Bankers came in at 18.5%. Politicians came in at 21%. These are not the most popular people in the world right now. But IT was still rated as worse. The only difference, and this might say something about politics, the only difference between the IT guys and the business guys was that the IT guys hated the bankers a little bit more. That was the only difference. IT guys don't like IT guys as much as non-IT guys don't like IT guys in terms of the language that we use. So we confuse ourselves. So if we are actively confusing ourselves, tying ourselves up in knots, what chance does the poor end customer have? I would argue precisely none. A wise man once taught me when I was a young lad that a confused market doesn't buy, it waits. So when we in the industry are having ridiculous debates about the semantic and the pedantic and, well, my definition of cloud is narrower than your definition of cloud and your cloud's not real cloud, the customer's out there going, do you know what, I'm not going to buy what you're selling. Sort yourselves out, guys. Once you can articulate what you do in a way that makes sense to me, then maybe I'll buy it, but let me know once that's happened. And we do it on some pretty fundamental levels. So a little bit of a moan, I openly admit, but there are certain things that are not the same that we use them to mean the same. So we've got internet, web, cloud. These things have started to be used completely to mean the same things. You may have saw during the Olympic opening ceremony when we had the Tim Berners-Lee sighting and our American chums said, he invented the internet. I said, well, we're going to have to give you guys credit for that, unfortunately. That was the US Department of Defense, DARPANET, it was Vinton Cerf's guys. But Tim Berners-Lee did invent the web. They are not the same thing. And the cloud is not the same thing as the web. You keep on hearing people talk about, consuming cloud-based services. It's like, you mean a website, right? It's not helpful to call everything a cloud-based service. And being a marketing guy, I strive for clarity. And, the article is important. There is the internet, it is one thing. There is the web, it is one thing. There is no such thing as the cloud. Doesn't exist. There's a cloud, or there are clouds. There is not the cloud up there that we can all consume in some special magic way. You decide what a cloud or clouds look like. Joe made the point earlier about the hypervisor wars, or some people call it the API wars. Things that are just not helpful. The reason why de facto standards are always better than open standards is because it gives you guys what you want. And it's something that's differentiated and adds value. There are, 43 standards bodies out there? There's only one standards body that really matters, and it's the customer. The market is a fairly efficient way of working out what standard works versus what doesn't work. And the reason why we're a VMware shop is that 9 out of 10 of our customers are too. So when they asked us, what are your cloud technologies based on? VMware, that's fine, so are ours. What matters is, can you get your stuff on, can you get your stuff off, will your stuff be safe and secure? Would you like Windows or Linux, sir? If you're asking about the hypervisor layer, you're asking the wrong question. Just as if you're asking about the hardware, you're asking the wrong question. If you care about whose hardware it is, if you care about whose hypervisor it is, do it yourself, which is a perfectly valid and realistic option. If that's the level of detail that you're interested in, that you want to get involved in, then you've maybe got the skills, the resource, and the money to do it in-house rather than paying for guys like us to deliver things to you as a managed service. And that's perfectly realistic, perfectly plausible, what most very, very large corporates today still do. But remember, one size does not fit all. And I'll pick that up a little bit later. And there are unhelpful things out there. There's no commonality whatsoever between IaaS and SaaS. And it's just not helpful. Being able to spin up some compute and storage resource and then layer your own platforms and applications on top of that is a completely world away from a per user, per month, per seat type model for consuming a software application. Just as it sounds like it's hosting an Exchange server and hosted Exchange sound the same, but they're not. 9 out of 10 of you, as a minimum, I would say, are still in an industry or in a sort of operational culture whereby you have to own your own email servers. You're not going to buy them per mailbox per month from some cloud-based service based somewhere in the middle of nowhere, just as we can host your telephone system for you, or you can go and buy some hosted IP telephony. They used to call it Centrex. Those two things are completely different entities. Most people in this room are still going to want to buy their own telephone system, control their own destiny. But now you can have that in a virtualization environment, and that's pretty cool because you can start doing some interesting things. Because you have to remember, there are certain things that we like to talk about, make them sound like they're new, that aren't new, and it annoys me a little bit. XYZ as a service is not new. There's nothing whatsoever new about buying something as a service. Just as there's nothing whatsoever new about CapEx versus OpEx as a debate, there's nothing new about disaster recovery as a service. I had a sudden remembrance. I remember something over the coffee break when I was a boy at Mitel. 15 years ago, we were providing managed services to government bodies where they would pay on a 7-year contract with a 3.5-year tech refresh. They'd be paying per user, per phone, per month, and then they'd pay incrementals for application usage. That was it. Classic as a service model. And we had disaster recovery services, which genuinely we had a couple of customers that they paid an annual fee in 6 figures, where we had a PBX in a van stationed somewhere near the City of London. And it was major banks said in the event of somebody blowing up their building, we would rock up in a van with a phone system, plug it in and get it working as fast as we could. Used it once in the event of a flood, worked absolutely fine. That was disaster recovery 15 years ago, was I need like-for-like hardware in a van, and I will pay you to stand there with the engine running, hopefully outside the blast radius, and then rock up with the kit. We're still doing exactly the same things today, but we're just doing it in a completely different way, in a way that we can do things much faster. We can do it to better service levels, but the business and payment model is not the same as the technology and the delivery model. You can have one without the other. If you want CapEx versus OpEx, you can have that. If you want to consume something as a service, you can have it. What the new technology, new delivery models give you is much greater flexibility, far greater options, hopefully some cost efficiencies, hopefully some technical upside, but you've got to separate the business piece from the technology piece. Hopefully the technology piece will be driving whatever business process you're trying to improve, but we get a little bit carried away about you can have everything as a service. Yeah, how long have I been able to buy mailboxes on a per mailbox per month basis? 12 years minimum? It's not that new. So a lot of the cloud-based stuff is not that new. But there are some very, very interesting things coming down the line or already here that are quite new, that are quite disruptive. But some of the hype confuses us. So when I say you can't have your cake and eat it, it really is that thing of there are some divergent forces out there. The elements on this slide, I originally wrote talking about cloud services for a blog on our website. It actually applies to far broader, more diverse areas of technology than just cloud. But in terms of you can't be all things to all men, there's a natural tension between scalability and stability. There's a lot of cloud-based services out there, real cloud-based services, that will tell you that it's unlimited scale. Like, no, it isn't. There's a theoretical limit somewhere, because if you want stable performance, that doesn't really go hand in hand with unlimited scalability. And elasticity is a wonderful thing, but it's very difficult to do it in a predictable way. There is natural tension between that. If you go boing up, down, it's hard to do that in a way that makes the performance stable and predictable. If you want 100% self-service, then it's really very difficult for a cloud service provider or any other service provider to commit to a service level on it, because you might break it, or somebody else might break it. Things that are going on that are out with your control. So I'm not saying that one of those things is right or one of those things is wrong. For us, we're a sort of mid-market corporate provider. People come to us for managed services. We're very much more on the right. On the things on the left, we do them in a much more controlled fashion, because you can't be all things to all men. So there is no one-size-fits-all. You've got to work out where you are on this point. The left-hand side is perfectly reasonable. There are guys out there who love to write scripts, that have got large IT departments, that want to manage things themselves. And that's fine. And there are other people who want to say, I've got a problem, make my website work, help me handle the peaks and troughs. When I launch a new campaign, turn up the dials, give me more capacity. When I don't need it anymore, turn it back down again. But it's your problem, because if it breaks, I get sacked. There are others that are a little bit more binary. You can be somewhere, or you can be anywhere. A lot of you have either internal or external governance, regulations, compliance, says you've got to know where your data lies, or it doesn't matter. You can be public or you can be private. You really can't be both. It was one of the things that we decided very early, was that we were not interested in being a public cloud provider. As defined by, can I get a credit card, go to 6dg.co.uk, spin up a bunch of VMs and pay for it? No. Because our customers expect that that won't happen. And then you're either managed or you're unmanaged. There isn't a sort of middle ground. As soon as you move away from being unmanaged, you're being managed to a point. We've got different customers who, they like to do some things themselves, or they like us to do absolutely everything. For us, the cost is the same. We are happy to take as much pain away as we like, but if you want to do certain things on your own because you prefer it that way, or you've got the admin resource to do it, that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to tell you how to run your business. And you can be the best marketing guy in the world, which I'm not, but you can be the best marketing guy in the world. I'm not going to change your culture. Wherever you are on this line, whatever position you want to adopt, whatever poison you pick, that's your choice and you're right. Some things we'll talk about in a second is about there are certain things that you have to go through in your head to make decisions about what sort of service do I want, what sort of technology delivery model do I want. But whatever you choose, you're right. I might not agree with you. I might agree with you 100%, but you're right. You might not want to do it the way you're being forced to do it because your boss has told you to do it in a certain way. Your culture might not fit with some of the new cloud-based models, but whatever you think, you're probably correct. And there's an interesting thing, if you look at the hosting landscape, there's a little bit of a challenge, but I don't think enough people care where clouds live, but they ought to. And the flip side is people get very concerned about where a data center lives if you're looking at colo. Perhaps they shouldn't. The speed of light does matter from time to time, but doesn't matter to your business. So we've got lots of city customers, lots of financial services businesses, guys doing algorithmic trading. Yeah, speed of light matters to them. For most other people, speed of light doesn't matter to them. So they're happy to do things on the cloud, sat in a data center, who knows where, that they never bother to evaluate. But they get very, very obsessed with, if they're in a co-location environment, exactly where that physical data center is, and perhaps that's not the most important thing they should be looking at. American politics is in vogue, so paraphrasing Bill Clinton, it's the connectivity, stupid. I don't know how you build reliable, stable services without really good connectivity. It's just not going to work. It's amazing how often you see people looking at services and they don't evaluate the network of the service provider. Different people arrive in a cloud-type world, a virtualized world, in different ways, as I'll look at in a couple of slides' time, but you've got to get the connectivity right. Whatever you do, make sure your network is up to scratch. Because Joe's absolutely right, the network is becoming stupid. The network is becoming, the hardware is becoming less and less relevant. It's becoming faster, flatter, simpler, cheaper. The intelligence is moving up the stack, but it better work. You better have your eggs in a fairly safe, strong basket. So back on planet Earth, we talk about the hosting stack in 6 degrees, that you've got certain things that make up what we do. Facilities in terms of colo, space, power, network, storage, servers, virtualization, and OS. That's IaaS, he said, nearly knocking the lectern over. That is infrastructure as a service. Now, as a hosting provider, we really don't mind whether it's a co-location customer, a managed colo, dedicated servers, cloud servers. That's what we provide to our customers. Whether it's hosting your own kit or it's a complete rental-based multi-tenant model or anywhere in between, that's the value we add. We are an infrastructure provider, and that's it. Our value is delivering the technologies and capabilities to deliver you the infrastructure that you can use to build your own platforms, whether it's SQL databases, dev tools, and any of the applications you might have within your business. But we don't do SaaS, and we don't do PaaS, because we don't think being all things to all men is the right thing to do. And there is absolutely no comparison between delivering you Microsoft Exchange on a per mailbox per month basis than there is to deliver you a whole bunch of instances of Microsoft servers on a per user or a per month basis. But you've got to separate out the infrastructure from the bits that go on top. And people like me always stand up and talk about your journeys to the cloud. And often you're not even going to the cloud. The customers we talk to are usually going on one of two journeys, sometimes both. You're going on a P2V, a physical to virtual journey, and you're going on an on-prem to an off-prem journey. It's pretty simple. You might be doing it for the first time. You might be doing it for different reasons. It might be storage. It might be backup. It might be DR. It might be you're moving all your primary services out of your server room and into a data center or cloud environment. But those paths are very well understood. What not many people talk about is how do suppliers get there? What's our journey to the cloud? And there's actually 3 quite interesting and very diverse models in there. A lot of the guys out there come from a colo background. And that means they've got really, really good data centers. Really, really great underpinning technologies. They will have their own network because you can't be a colo provider without a decent network. And they're really good at stuff that just works. Then you've got guys who come from an on-prem, that they are more traditional ICT VARs, that basically the journey to the cloud involves, I used to sell you stuff that you put in your server rooms, so I'd sell you some servers and some operating systems and some VMware licenses. Now I'll put that in a data center, but I don't really know much about data centers, but I'll buy some wholesale space. And then the last one is guys who come at that world from a web hosting environment, where they're really good at stuff that works, that can handle very bursty, peaky traffic, that can take a lot of pounding, but because everything that they're used to doing is internet-facing, they haven't got a connectivity network in the same way that the guys on the left-hand side may have. Now, I don't think one of these is right or wrong. If you look at the companies we put together to form 6 Degrees Group, we very sort of deliberately got a bit of all of these because they are all very, very different. So we've got our own data centers, we've got some IP telephony and sort of server and software technologies and skills within the business, some really clever VMware guys, really clever Microsoft guys, and we've bought a few companies that had a sort of cloud web hosting background. Because all of these things are valid, but they are all uniquely different. So if you're doing enterprise application hosting, things that are running your business, your CRM servers, your ERP servers, you might want to take a look at who's providing it, because the guys in the middle will know all about the software and how to keep that working. The guys on the left will know how to keep the data center up and running to keep it going. And the guys on the right will know about keeping the servers working, but will they know how to keep the network working? Is there a network? Do you want to do all that stuff over the internet, or do you want it secured and saved and networked end to end? And ultimately, we're going to be launching next month a microsite that talks about, trying to puncture some of the myths around hosting, around cloud, helping to educate in terms of some of the terminologies, but also saying, look, putting a decision tree up there that just says, here are fundamentally the factors about how you decide what sort of service is right for you. Whether you're looking at, so at the top level, it looks at what are you trying to host? So are you hosting applications? Or are you hosting a website? Or are you looking for some sort of backup BCDR type solution? Those 3 things are completely different. How you evaluate a web hosting requirement versus an application hosting requirement is completely different, because if nothing else, by definition, one faces the rest of the business and the other one faces the internet. They are blurring, but they are still different. Then you look at the tenanting scenario. Some people are just opposed to multi-tenant platforms. And if that's your view, I'm not going to try and convince you otherwise. I kind of have some sort of legacy attitudes to that myself. So if you don't want a multi-tenant platform, then that's absolutely fine. Don't let your hosting provider tell you anything different, but you need to get over that. You need to make that decision one way or the other, and you need to make it very early in the process. And then you're into owning or renting. Forget about CapEx or OpEx. Do you want to own the asset, or do you want to rent the asset? Because then that determines, are you into... because if you're in a single-tenant platform, you can still rent it. If you're in a multi-tenant platform, you haven't got any choice. You're not going to buy a multi-tenant platform, because then you'd be becoming a cloud provider yourself. Do you want virtualization? I mean, some of you don't. There are people out there who still say, I want dedicated servers. Okay, that's valid for certain applications. For most people, they're going to want a virtualization environment, but do you want to do it yourself? Have you got those skills to do it in-house, or do you want to do it as a managed service? And lastly, do you want us to wrap in firewalls, load balancers, end-to-end WAN, end-to-end security, all those things, or do you not? And as you go through those ones, you then get to one of the options on this screen, plus public cloud. So the one below, that's our portfolio, but there's also public cloud. So if you want a multi-tenanted, virtualized, unsecured, no load balancers, no whatever, glue it all together, unmanaged service, well, you're in a public cloud environment, or you are somewhere on this screen. You might want CPE. A lot of you guys, a lot of consumers or customers are talking about on-premise clouds. You're really talking about your own VMware stack, but you're using the terminology that the bigger industry is using, so that's quite helpful. Maybe you just want colo. Maybe you want what we've called cloud managed services, which is, I want to give you 10 servers, but could you build me a cloud with 50 VMs on it and burst it to 200 when I need it? Or whatever it is. That's where we're adding the expertise. You're on our vSphere. You've got access to our hybrid cloud type models, but you still own the asset. You can take it out the data center if you so wish. Versus private cloud, virtual private cloud, you want to be single tenant and multi-tenant. But it's the things on the previous slide, that's what will get you there. I don't like one size fits all. I don't like you have to have it this way. Because if any supplier says you have to have it this way, which is going to look really stupid on camera, if you have to have it this way, it's because that's the only thing they do. If they're taking a more consultative approach, taking you through an iterative, sensible process, it's because they've got options. They're not trying to impose their will on you because you're right, I'm not. So a quick look just to finish about what sort of things are coming down the road. A little bit of fun as much as anything else, but it is going to change what we do. You know, things like 4G, things like 3D printing, that's going to transform the manufacturing sector, which is still 20% of British GDP. It's going to have a massive bandwidth implications because the files to do 3D printing are fairly enormous. 4G is going to chew up bandwidth, is going to give us more things that we can store, more things that we can pull up, push down, etc., etc. Network virtualization and software-defined networks aren't quite the same thing, Joe's right. It is a ridiculously unhelpful debate. Some of the things around SDNs sort of scares me a little bit, at least some of the theoretical things. I don't really like the idea of an application deciding what level of resource and priority it should have across a network. I'd rather that there was a little bit more of a sensible way to do that. But network virtualization is absolutely going to happen. It already is. You look at who Nicira's customers are, they're massive. Massive data centers. You look at, if you want to know what's going to come down into our sort of size as mid-market providers and into most corporates, just go and look at what's happening in Facebook's data center, Google's data center, Bank of America's data center. All these things are happening right now. All these guys, those mega providers are all clamoring, screaming at our friends in the IEEE 802.3 committee for, could you kindly speed up with fractional terabit Ethernet, looking at being maybe 300 gig type speeds fairly soon. You know, screens will just continue to be absolutely everywhere, driven by the fact that bandwidth is just going to continue to grow at that sort of level. There are new things that we'll be seeing in the social arena that we don't even have a clue about. Again, if I knew what was going to happen in social media over the next few years, I'd be on my desert island waving to Joe on his yacht. I don't know. But what I do know is that as human beings, we are naturally opposed to homogeneity. We don't like all things to be the same and to be treated in the same ways. I have a funny inkling that in 20 years' time, we will look at the Facebook of today in the same way we look at the Ford Model T. It was the volume, production grade, one-size-fits-all thing that proved the model, but it's going to evolve into new and different ways. I can buy 1 million different types of Vauxhall, for crying out loud. Never mind one size fits all. I'm going to be able to do something similar in a social, digital, media context because I am an individual and I really don't like being the same as the next guy, and neither do most of you. I just don't know what it is yet. And it could well be Facebook. But right now, you know, it doesn't really reflect the way we run our lives. You know, some of the more interesting social media things out there, if you saw Metro, there was one in Metro this morning, can't remember what it was called. There's a lot of business models based on us thinking that we're going to take our friend's advice. Like, I'll eat in that restaurant because my friend likes it. Whereas some of my friends are complete heathens when it comes to food. And I'm sure a lot of them will turn around and go, Campbell, you're from Glasgow. I'll take your advice if I'm looking for something deep fried or kebab based. But, you know, but your valuation or evaluation of a Thai restaurant means absolutely nothing to me. So just because my friend likes it doesn't necessarily mean that I do. Terabit speeds will be coming along. Nigel touched on this earlier, that sort of connected people idea, the fact that we will be wearing more technology, and I'll actually go even further. By the time you start getting terabit to the edge, we'll be into a subatomic and nanotech type mode. There will be that world when if I go skiing, before I go out in the slopes, I will take a pill that will have diagnostic capabilities, GPS capabilities, that I will subscribe to monitoring services on the internet that says if my heart rate reaches certain levels, if my hangover reaches certain levels, things will kick in and happen, and if I get lost, then somebody will come and find me. And that will all happen just with some clever nanotech stuff that's going on. If you really want to get a sore head, go and talk to the BT guys at Astral Park, the R&D guys at Martlesham. Talk to them about subatomic encryption, subatomic networking. It will blow your head off. You think you didn't understand what Joel talked about? Go and talk to the R&D guys doing these things. It is breathtaking, the sorts of things that will be coming down the line. I just don't know what it'll look like yet. We'll have 10 terabit Ethernet and self-driving cars. And, you know, everybody says to me, I want my hoverboard. Life is not going to be Back to the Future, but we will probably have self-driving cars, be fairly ubiquitous by then. They're going to be very heavily networked because, you know, it's all going to be controlled by magic forces in the sky. So it'd better work, and it better be resilient, and it better be diverse. But it's going to be an interesting time. But the things that are going to happen, it will be more bandwidth. It will be in more places. We will be doing more things. We will be doing things we didn't even imagine doing. It will be more and more virtualized, and you will not be giving a stuff about the hardware that underpins it. That's not what adds value. Software and services are what adds value. platforms that you can build things on or things you can consume as businesses and users. That's what really matters to you, not whose switch, not whose router, not whose server. That is not what you're going to be buying going forwards. You know, you look at what guys like us are looking at doing. We're looking at the fact that you can just take a port, light it at whatever speed you want, burst it, 100 meg, 10 gig, fractions of terabits in years to come, and just consume services down it. You know, whether it's cloud machines, data center ingress, egress, whether it's SIP trunks, whether it's bandwidth. You know, we had the concept of basically it's just like, we're going to give you a bunch of dials, just turn them up. You know, if you're doing an outbound marketing campaign, turn up your SIP trunks, make some more phone calls, turn it back down again. You're doing you're doing a web campaign, turn up more VMs, turn up your ingress bandwidth, and then turn them back down again. You know, you want to do some more backup, you want to back up your backup with your backup. You want to link to some stuff in a Telecity building with a Telehouse building with our building, we'll do it across our network. How fast, how quickly, how often, how much of it would you like? Really, really flexible, really, really good service, but totally tailored to what you want to do because one size doesn't fit all. And we'll put comms into that environment. You know, this is one of the things that's been in our heads at 6 Degrees since the beginning was not enough people talking about putting a VIA call control in a VMware environment in a cloud or in a data center in a diverse, resilient fashion, because why wouldn't you? Why are people only looking at email and CRM and ERP and file servers and stuff like that for sort of moving things off-site and storage? Why aren't you doing it for telephony? Because we can do all that just as well in that environment. It's really important. It's a big fact of how you work and communicate. Your customer doesn't necessarily think that phoning you versus sending you a text versus sending you an email is any different. They're just interacting with you. Work out how you want to interact with your customers, and then maybe guys like us will help you do it. And ultimately, to finish, you know, in terms of the things that people like ourselves can bring to the table, this is how we think that convergence stacks up, is that you've got some on-prem stuff, IP, PBXs, gateways, video conferencing, routers. You're never going to get away from on-prem. People were making it sound like if everything's in the cloud, you don't need anything on-premise. You're still going to have a PC and a router, if nothing else. Lots of different access technologies, fiber, copper, not going away. We will be getting ridiculous speeds out of copper going forward just because, you know, it's there, it's in the ground, and it's everywhere. Mobile, line rental, different infrastructures that sit on top of that, different services that sit on top of the infrastructure, whether it's voice, whether it's app hosting, video conferencing, and value-adding services on top of that are what you really, really are buying. You know, most people come to us looking for business continuity or disaster recovery or backup or some service, some business need. They don't typically say, I'd like some cloud from you, Campbell. There's usually a business process or a business need driving the conversation you have, not sell me one of those clouds, please, Gov. So that's it from me. You know, bear that last slide in mind in terms of how you stack up the things that are the things that you evaluate when you look at suppliers. Alistair will touch on this in a second, but I'll be back for the Q&A in a few minutes. Thank you.